have Tim Watson from Remax with us today to talk about the commercial market. Tim, when it comes to commercial foreclosures, has the process with commercial foreclosures or commercial short sales improved, quickened, changed, in the last few months?
Oh, absolutely, Andrew, and I want to take the time to thank you for allowing me to come in today. I'm
Awesome.
really excited. This is the second time you gave me the pleasure of coming in and doing this, and thank you for your interest in commercial real estate. I know you guys are mainly geared towards residential, so I do like the fact that you're giving me a call to ask my expertise. I hope it brings value to you. And congratulations on coming up almost 2 years of this show.
Yeah, very exciting.
Everywhere I go, when I discuss you and your show, people say, oh yes, I listen to that quite a bit and I really enjoy it.
Awesome.
But to get to your question, some of the changes that we have seen, naturally when you have so much inventory on the market, and I'll point out that commercial does lag residential by a year to 18 months in some of the statistics and some of the ins and outs of foreclosures. But what's happening now, similar to some of the changes that's happening in residential, is banks are wanting to shorten the time, and they're coming to owners of these assets and asking them if they would like to do what's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And I believe that's happening in residential too, and it basically does save the property owner from going through the process of foreclosure.
Right.
And sometimes even the debt can be forgiven. So differently than some of the past experiences with residential where that debt was forgiven, the thing about commercial real estate, some of these attorneys and bankers have been going after the commercial property owner after the foreclosure proceedings.
Right, which is probably not as common in residential. I mean, in residential, I can't think of any times, in fact, that our clients have come back and said they got pursued for the debt. It's very uncommon. Usually there's a waiver of deficiency, but I'd always heard with commercial, the banks and attorneys were a little bit more aggressive, especially because you're probably dealing with bigger numbers too.
Absolutely, and typically some of these property owners, they don't have any money after these assets, but sometimes they do, and they do put the deficiency judgment on the corporation that may own these. You
mentioned 12 to 18 months, kind of the commercial market trails residential. Does that also, would you also say that coincides with recovery? Like, for example, in the residential market right now, we're seeing prices are starting to climb again, homes are flying off the shelf, we have a lack of inventory. Would you say commercial mirrors that, or is different than that?
It does have some similarities. Once the values, well, the values are what the values are, but once the prices of commercial real estate come in line with what we call the fundamental analytical approach to the investment, once that gets into a range of investment return, then the investors will pull the trigger and buy these assets. And a lot of them are being bought with cash right now. But you
mentioned I think last year your transactions, more than 90% of them were cash. So the majority of the money out there in the commercial world right now is cash.
Absolutely, cash is king right now in commercial real estate.
So in terms of the evaluation of a commercial property. So if there's someone out there looking to sell a property or buy commercial property, go to searchtampacommercial.com. Again, that is searchtampacommercial.com. You can look at properties, you can fill out forms and contact us if you're interested in buying a commercial property or interested in getting an evaluation or selling a commercial property. So Tim, you'd mentioned earlier to me, kind of that there's a lack of understanding from people that even own commercial property how to value it. What are kind of some of the basics that people need to understand when you're evaluating what a commercial property is worth? Because it's a lot different than residential.
Well, the number one reason why a piece of commercial property is worth is what it's worth is what it can return the investor or makes sense to the actual user of the investment. If you're going to use a property for your shop, your business, then you're going to compare that to only one other thing, and that's leasing the same type of property. So if the cash outlay doesn't disturb your business, a lot of people want a lease because they have cash to put into the business, so they'll lease for 5 and 10 years. But some people do want to own the assets, like McDonald's. All McDonald's are owned by the franchisee. I don't want to say all, but most. But with that being said, if you buy a property as an investment, you're going to put a tenant in there. The quality of that tenant and the quality of that cash flow determines 100% what that value of that property is worth.
Right, so it's the cap rate. I mean,
capitalization, yes.
And when you look at, residential, unless you're looking at multifamily or duplexes or apartment buildings, it's usually the comps that tell you, it's a sales comparison approach. It's a completely different approach, because a lot of people call us up and say, hey, I've got a house and it rents for X, and what's it worth? And again, you can sometimes mirror a commercial and turn that into, okay, what's the yield, and determine what it's worth. But usually it's worth more on the retail from sales comparison than it is from the rent numbers, and depending on the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, if you can buy a house at the right price and rent it for a high amount, then you're going to have a nice return. And there is a number that you can plug in to see what that actual return is.
Right. So again, you're listening to the Duncan Duo Real Estate Show here on 970 WFLA. If you have questions about real estate, whether it's residential, buying, selling, investing, foreclosures, or, of course, the commercial real estate market, we're here to answer your questions. You can give us a call in Hillsborough at 990-9352 and Pinellas at 461-9352, and then toll-free anywhere in the world, 1-800-969-9352. So, Tim, when we talk about segments of the commercial real estate market, you look at multifamily, and I see a plethora of articles come out over the past few weeks kind of analyzing 2012 and making predictions for 2013. But it sounds like multifamily is going to be the predominant driver of the commercial market in 2013. A lot of apartment buildings being built, a lot more people really kind of going after that market. Compared to multifamily, what are some of the other segments of commercial real estate that you would see as being, kind of strong, or that you would predict are going to perform really well in 2013?
Well, it's really hard to say. We're still in a slump when it comes to retail properties and office properties. I have several properties on the market. A lot of them are foreclosure properties. I've got some land on the market. And I would say land is probably the worst investment today.
Right, and again, preface that by saying if it was in the right location, like we have people that buy land, like for example in South Tampa, that bought it a year or 2 years ago and are selling for a profit today. So it's going to depend, but you're right, and because it can't generate cash, and builders and developers haven't really, they're starting to. I mean, I met with a heavy landowner this past week that owns thousands of acres in Pasco County, and we're starting to see interest coming back from the builders, but it's not there yet to where it's a safe bet to buy. If you own it, you're going to start to see some people have interest in buying it. If you're looking to buy it, probably not yet.
If you think about it, the land investment is probably the biggest risk, or one of the biggest risks in all the elements of doing an improvement on that property. If you decide that you're an investor, you have some money, and you think, well, I want to build a restaurant shell, or I want to build a retail, or I want to build a multifamily apartment, which is the number one best investment today in commercial real estate. But there is a number that you have to plug in for that land, and the construction costs are going to be what they're going to be, but your expected return kind of backs out of all that equation into what you need or should pay for that land. And that is where you start. So the investment in the land is going to be a huge entry into the analysis factor of commercial real estate.
No question about it. So, and I think, again, when you look at any kind of investment real estate, the most important answer is what can you get in an annual return on the property. What can it rent for? What kind of cash flow can you get from it? And that's something we've seen on the residential side. I mean, I'm going to spend some time a little later in the show talking about, kind of rental investors and some of the large corporations that have moved into Tampa Bay that are buying up hundreds of homes, and why they're doing it. And not only why they're doing it, but the benefit to the market being that it's helping stabilize the market. It's helping, people be able to sell that maybe couldn't be able to sell. It's helping to create transactions. So, the rental investors are a huge portion of the residential real estate market. But I think people in the bust got away from paying attention to what something could rent for and what could it return annually, and they started paying more attention to what could it be worth, what can I flip it for, what's it going to go up in value. Started speculating really heavy, and a good sound investor is going to have multiple plans for a property, but if they base their decisions on primarily cash flow and what it can rent for, no matter you're looking residential or commercial, they're going to make good decisions and buy good property. So again, you're listening to the Duncan Duo Real Estate Show. You can call us with your questions, 990-9352 in Hillsborough, 461-9352 in Pinellas, and toll free 1-800-969-9352. We're going to be back after a quick break to talk about real estate brokers reporting unseasonably high interest among home shoppers, as well as the home builders forecast for 2013 here on 970 WFLA.